Welcome along to the Punter, the show that keeps you up to date with all the sports betting action across the sporting calendar. On today's show, we'll be delving once again into the athletics. When it comes to the Olympics, we'll be talking football. The Premier League season, of course, just a couple of weeks away. We're also talking tennis and indeed golf. The final major of the season is just a few days away. The USPGA Championship, of course. I'm pleased to say that Russ Wiseman of Sporting Bet is with me in the studio. Russ, how are you doing?
Evening, Dan. How you doing?
Good. We've got to review the weekend first of all, obviously, because it was a fantastic weekend, especially the Saturday when it came to Team GB in the Olympics. From a punting point of view, there were one or two short prize favourites. Let's concentrate just on Team GB for a second. Did punters want to back Mo Farah? Were people getting involved with Andy Murray? How did you see it?
Yeah, very disappointing weekend from a bookmaking perspective. Brilliant for punters. I mean, these were well-backed favourites, Dan. Andy Murray notwithstanding, but Jess Ennis, of course, was a heavily backed favourite. She was already about 9 on going into the Saturday, so punters really couldn't get involved at that stage. They needed to have taken the 4 to 5 that was available on the Friday. Mo Farah, completely different story. 11 to 8 he opened in the morning. Generally slow betting, but as the day went on, he was the only person people wanted to know. He was 5 to 6 odds on when the race kicked off. Incredible price considering the quality and depth of that field. And in play, which was the fascinating market, even though it was a rough race and probably things didn't go his way, he never traded above odds on. So quite remarkable how much money was wagered on Mo Farah. And Murray himself obviously was a decent result because people wanted to be with Federer. But I've got to say, Mo Farah was the big one for people this weekend. And obviously, if you doubled that up with Jess Ennis at the start, a very nice return indeed.
Of course, when it came to the Beijing Olympics, Usain Bolt made the headlines with that astonishing run in the 100 metres. Coming into the London Olympics, it was slightly different because there were doubters when it came to Usain Bolt. And the market over the course of the weekend was fascinating because ahead of the heats, he was a drifter. And then when he was very quick in his semi-final, it all changed. Tell us what happened on Sunday and your view on Usain Bolt.
And you summed up very nicely there, Dan. It really did change. Let's look at the overall market beforehand. Obviously, the weeks prior to this, very anti-Bolt, weren't they, really? He started this championships off 6 to 4 on, very backable price. I can remember him being 5s on, as short as that, just going back a couple of months ago. Obviously, his big rival was the Beast. You know, Johan Blake was around about a 7 to 4 chance. They were the two well ahead of the market. Gatlin and people like Gay was trading around about 20 to 1. We saw those heats. He was pretty unimpressive, wasn't he? You could have backed Usain Bolt at even money heading into yesterday's semi-final. Blake was into around about 6 to 4. All changes you mentioned there, Dan. We framed him up. We wanted to be on Usain Bolt's side. Bookmakers did take a very differing view, and this is where punters do have a major chance of beating us, where we frame those prices very quickly after a semi-final. We don't really look at each other's prices. We went 2 to 9 Bolt at that stage, which we thought was painfully short. Some other firms were 2 to 5, a little bit of arbitrage knocking around there, but he was still backed off the board. He was a heavy loser for Sporting Bet. Even at 2 to 9, people were flooding in at the end. All the money proved correct again.
Chris Graham is also on the show tonight. Chris, how did you see the weekend action? Because there was success for Team GB. There were 1 or 2 short price favourites going. Usain Bolt, who we just heard from Russ, was backed into a very, very short after his semi-final success. What was your view of the weekend?
I just thought it was just a fabulous weekend that will live with us for as long as we live. I watched the action on Saturday night in a pub, and the pub was absolutely rammed. It was like almost a football crowd watching athletics. It was quite surreal. But it was just a joy to behold, and for me the highlight was Mo Farah at the end, the headline act, if you like. You know, busting that huge stat that, you know, British runners had never won these long distance races at Olympics. Liz McColgan had failed. We saw that in the past, but Brendan Foster. But my oh my, wasn't he fantastic? Provided the headline act in what was a magnificent weekend to be British. And you know, we were being sort of low in our expectations at the start for Britain at the Olympics. Boy, they've smashed that now, and it's just fantastic. And you know, a great weekend.
No doubt about that. Chris, when it comes to Sports Personality of the Year, have you got any further view on it? Because everyone's been talking about Bradley Wiggins as an absolute shoo-in for this, but we've just seen stellar performances from the likes of Ennis and Murray. Does it change at all in your view?
Well, it's absolutely fascinating, Dan. Absolutely fascinating. It's competitive for the first time ever. We've actually got a decent Sports Personality of the Year here. Wiggins was 1 to 8 after he won the time trial on Wednesday. People saying it was an absolute dead set. He's drifted to about 2 to 5 now after Jess Ennis, the nation's darling, of course. Show me a man who doesn't fancy Jess Ennis, I'll show you a liar. Jess Ennis, I've got into 72. And you're right, the great Andy Murray as well. What if he wins at Flushing Meadow next month? How will that affect it? But for me, I mean, Wiggins and Ennis, two of the most popular sports people I can ever remember in the UK. But Wiggins, for me, still has to be the shout. He's just the coolest guy in the world, isn't he, Brad Wiggins? He's amazing. But 285 now, a wee bit of value maybe.
Strange one, isn't it, that? Because suddenly we've had these big performances, and yes, Jessica Innes was short, but she's done all the interviews, she's done 24 hours worth of media, and the market changes, doesn't it? Because Bradley Wiggins was almost last week's news. Yeah. Yes, he's got to be the favourites. It could be like finding money in the street at 2 to 5 or so, but there's just a slight chink in the armour when it comes to the BBC Sports Personality of the Year odds.
I think there is a chink, Dan, and Chris, some of the odds nicely there. You're looking at 8 on. Initially, everyone was interested in Bradley Wiggins, weren't they? He was the golden man. One of the greatest performances any of us have ever seen. And then, Jess Ennis, as mentioned there, the darling of the nation, she delivers on the high stage, golden girl in every respect. If you're looking at them purely on sporting achievement, and I think eventually it will die down about Jess Ennis ever so slightly. Let's look at Bradley Wiggins, what he's done here. It really does break all kinds of barriers. And the other thing he's got going for him as well, he's not only got the Tour de France factor, but that Olympic gold medal factor, the fact that he's the most successful Olympian we've ever had now. That kind of should put him over the edge. But 2 to 5 is a major betting event. I'm one of these bookmakers who probably slightly poo-poos these novelty markets, but this is a major betting event now. People do stake large amounts on it, and we do take them as well as bookmakers. So 2 to 5 for me is a bet at the moment, just because the achievements are so fabulous.
Speaking of large amounts, there was large amounts, of course, punted on Usain Bolt to win the 100 metres last night. What about the 200 metres? He was always shorter for the 200 than the 100 anyway, even though Johan Blake had beaten Bolt in the Jamaican trials, as he'd done in the 100 metres. But after that performance last night, one suspects he's pretty short price favourite.
Yeah, we've gone 7 on here, Dan. 7 on and 4 to 1. Now, that essentially, we're saying that the rest of the field, and I think we're looking at Wallace Spearman after that 28 on, we're saying it's a 2-runner race. I think if you break it down from a punting perspective and a bit of analysis, this was always going to be Johan Blake's better chance. He didn't do anything wrong last night. Broke his personal best, ran as good as he can do. I think that he couldn't do any more. However, he does have a 19.3 in the locker for the 200 metres. That gives him a major chance on his best form. If Bolt obviously produces his best, we're looking at a good 7 on chance. But 4 to 1 may offer some kind of value for Blake. I think at 4 to 1 he's certainly a better bet than he was at 7 to 4, for example, before the heats of the 100. So possible chink. You don't know what it's taken out of Bolt. Maybe. And he wasn't really pulling away massively at the end. He definitely gave it everything. There wasn't anything else left in the locker. And the fact that he's got 19.3 in the tank here, Johan Blake, gives him some sort of chance, I think.
Let's get the latest prices with the top end of the market when it comes for the 200. Chris, how do we bet for this one?
Yeah, it completely has all changed here, Dan. It really is. And Bolt was 4 to 7 last week for this, with Blake at 13 to 8. And look at this; it's completely changed, as we would say here. You say Bolt now 1 to 7, as Russ says. Very short price for me. I know he was the hero last night and fantastic, but I mean, where are the doubters now? Johan Blake 16 to 5. This is his best event, like Russ says. It really is, and if that's a fair price, I think that's decent. But let's go big here. Let's go large, if you like. Christopher Lemaitre, 66 to 1. This guy has run faster at his age than Bolt and Blake ever did at the 200 metres. It's unlikely to win. I get that, but if you can get a price on him winning a medal, he got bronze last year at Daegu, in 2011 in the World Championships. He's certainly capable of getting a medal. So, if you want Bolt beaten here, if you're looking for a big price, how not look at that? Christophe Lemaitre, the Frenchman, the fastest Caucasian ever, at 66 to 1.
66 about Lemaitre. I must admit, I can't really see him winning, but he might get a place. And I guess we've got to look at the heats and the semi-finals as well, because those were the races that changed all the odds. We can speculate all we want going into an Olympic Championships, but it was the semi-finals that blew the market apart. So if something should happen in the semi-finals, punters have just got to be quick to react, I guess, whether that's betting for Bolt or Blake, or indeed betting in a betting without market that could crop up nearer the time.
For all the analysis and speculation we've got, Dan, the only way you can form an opinion on this is by the evidence you actually see before you on the track. This is where people obviously convert the odds into value, decide what the best best plan of attack is, and that's what bookmakers were doing all the time last night. This is where punters really do have a wonderful opportunity, because the bookmakers are very keen. We're all so keen to react the first, be quick, put the prices up quickly. If you've got access to internet, if you're listening to the experts here at Sports Night TV, you've got that chance of maybe just picking off some value. And Chris points out there, Lemaitre, for example, maybe, just maybe, he'll show some signs of form. It's an endurance event, essentially, the 200 metres. You've got to stay the trip, haven't you? That's the way it's run. Those are the guys who will be focusing on this. Maybe he'll show enough to maybe medal, and there may be some value around.
What about 4x100? We're going to finish with this for this section. I mean, this is the Jamaicans to lose, surely. I mean, I know that Asafa Powell, of course, pulled up in the 100 last night, but they've got so many talented sprinters. Should it really matter?
Well, so much about punting is about momentum. It's about the media. It's about the way we perceive things. There's only two names that are even being mentioned in anyone's vocabulary here regarding sprinting, Dan. Usain Bolt, obviously, and then Johan Blake. They're both Jamaican. Now, a lot's been made of Asafa Powell potentially being injured. It doesn't make any difference. We were 2-5 today about Jamaica. We're now 100-30 on. They will go off 4 on Jamaica, barring some kind of accident. They could grab any kind of character off the street here and put him on the third change. It's not going to make any difference. The punters will be with Jamaica. I'm not saying they're definitely going to win, and it certainly will open up some value about USA.
Let's get the prices. Chris, could you run the anchor leg on this one for Jamaica?
Well, you know what? I'm taking a view here, and that is the good old US of A here. They've got depth in their squad here, unlike the Jamaicans, as far as I'm concerned. They've got the 2 fastest guys in the world, the Jamaicans, but they didn't have depth. The USA have got Gatlin, they've got Ryan Bailey, they've got Wallace Spearman, they've got Tyson Gay. They've got a really in-depth squad, and I think that might be the difference here. And at 13-5, I think it's a punt. For me, it should be 7-4, 13-8, that kind of angle, but 13-5, for me, the juicy punt just has to come to the USA, as much as I hate saying that.
Jamaica, 4-11. The USA could be the value 13-5 again. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the heats as well. They do have the heats, of course, when it comes to the 4x100 metres. And we've seen so often that the baton, unfortunately, for certain teams can crash to the ground. It's happened with the USA recently in Olympics and World Championships. It's happened to Team GB as well. Let's hope it doesn't happen, though, and we get a clean run race when it comes to the relay. That's all we've got time for this part of the punter, but we've got much more to come. We're going to be talking football. We've got golf and tennis on the agenda as well. Don't go away. Welcome back to The Punter as we delve into all the sports betting action across the sporting calendar. We've tackled the Olympics for now. Let's talk Premier League football. We are less than 2 weeks away from the start of the English top flight. Russ Wiseman of Sporting Bet is with me in the studio. Russ, what's your anti-post book looking like at the moment? Because the Olympics has taken up all of the sports pages and indeed the front pages of the newspapers. It's on every single television screen at the moment. And for once, the Premier League has been pushed aside. Has that been reflected on the money that you've taken or haven't taken in the run-up to the league?
Yeah, good point, Dan, and you're bang on the mark there. I mean, for some great racing, and we've had Royal Ascot, Glorious Good with the Olympics. There's been some superb sports, some good golf, lots of really fabulous sports to bet on. And because of that, the anti-post book in the football is looking very quiet, and the prices have been very static now for a good month. No real liability to speak of at all. That will build up next week, no doubt about it. You guys, the media people, will start to build the momentum. We'll start getting some action, some thoughts, some analysis. It will change. But at the moment, the liabilities are pretty much non-existent. And we do need to say as well, this is the punter, we do need to point this out, that people are far more unwilling these days to have money tied up for a good 8 or 9 months. It's a long time to do that. Unless you're really sure, and potentially maybe want a few accas in the divisions, it's difficult to maybe have a big bet on City or United and just to see that money sit there. It's quite a tricky call for many punters.
Yeah, I guess it's the demise of credit accounts as well in lots of ways, because years and years ago, if you wanted a decent bet and you put it on credit, exactly, you wouldn't really worry the punter, it'd worry the bookmaker.
And that's a great point as well. I mean, if you needed to bet on your debit card, I mean, it's difficult. Maybe you could find a decent 6-5 shot this weekend. Why back City at 6-5, for example, now, when you can get paid out in short time? But the way you will find people stepping in a big way is some major signings, maybe a look at the fixtures and predicting that a team will win 5 or 6 in a row. Then you might see big changes. But it's rare now for people to have that big money tied up for a long period of time. But as you mentioned before we came on air here, it's still about those accas in the divisions. There's still some great bets to be had, some exotics, and some massive payouts to possibly be had as well.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get rich back in Manchester City to win the Premier League. They are the short price favourites and have been over the course of the summer. Let's get the top end of the market. Chris Graham's got the news for us.
Yeah, I mean, if you took the odds the morning after the last game of the season back on May the 11th, pretty much the same now. Nothing's changed. Rusty is absolutely static, and we're kind of wanting something to happen here. Man City, just a shade of odds against at the moment. But it's Man United for me that I think could potentially get shorter and shorter. Loads of rumours now about Van Persie, Lucas Moura, the Brazilian winger, and Leighton Baines as well. And of course, Vidic is back after 6 months out. So United potentially could get a lot short. 94 with Sporting Bet at the moment. As big as 11-4 elsewhere, which I think is a really big price for such a team with such a magnificent championship pedigree. Manchester United, write them off at your peril. I'm not prepared to write them off. That's for the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson in charge. So for me, 94 Man United is probably the price that would get me excited at the moment. Chelsea never really got shorter, despite the fact they made all these signings over the last 2 months. Remain at 92. Arsenal, you imagine, just got to get bigger and bigger at 10-1 there. But it's Man City down at the top of the betting at 6-5. But will Man United get any shorter when the signings come in?
Be interesting. And as Chris said, if Robin van Persie moves, when Arsenal's odds are probably going to get bigger, and whoever he goes to is going to get shorter. Should he go to an English club? The suggestions he might go to Manchester United or Manchester City. If he did move, say, to Manchester United, would you cut Manchester United, or would you wait to see if you saw any cash?
Instinctively, I've been a trader and a bookmaker myself for many years, Dan. I'd be 15-8 United, 14-1 Arsenal, just in that one move. But that's just mainly to kind of anticipate what punters will do. Nobody's going to want to back Arsenal if Van Persie leaves and then goes to someone like United, and people will want to be United. One thing I should point out here, that this is such a massive financial market now. Let's not talk about just sports betting, a global financial market, the Premier League. I mean, traded to very fine margins, tight all over the world globally. We're talking about billions of pounds bet here. These markets aren't really going to fluctuate unless something pretty dramatic happens. Signing Van Persie is one of those things. A good run of form is another one. Maybe some big team news, that can happen, but they're not going to move a lot, these odds. And the fact is that City at the moment still remain a solid 6-5 chance. They're defending champions. It's difficult for them to imagine them not improving a little bit this year. But you know, you look at Spurs and Liverpool, they're 25 and 28-1. You will get the sentimental, the loyal each way money for those two teams, but difficult to see them breaking into that top-notch level.
You mentioned a run of form, and obviously when the season starts, and for example Arsenal, I think have got Stoke, Liverpool and Manchester City as their first 3 away games. You know, you factor in roughly what you think you're going to get, but when the cold, hard facts come out and Arsenal maybe only get sort of 2 points from their first 3 away games, then the odds will move. So punters perhaps can look at the first 4 to 6 games and think, right, well, I know that City, I think they take on Southampton, don't they? First of all, they've got Queen's Park Rangers, I think, in their first few games as well. Potentially, if they win their first 3 games, they're going to go odds on up.
Absolutely. No question about that. They will do that, Dan. We saw actually about 4 games in last year, City were trailing around about 11-4 at one stage. And they had a couple of really good performances in a row. I think they beat Spurs quite convincingly, and then they followed that up with another good performance. And the odds completely crashed. I mean, literally 13-8. I mean, you do get a re-rating of a team as a bookmaker. It can happen, and it can go out the other way as well. If you see that Arsenal are not going to be performing away, they'll quickly become 20-1. So bookmakers will react fairly quickly. I just feel that this is such a static and well-matured market now. It's going to take something dramatic to really shift them. The one team in there, I guess, that we don't really know about at the moment, considering that most of us believe that City and United will be there come the end of the season, and that probably Arsenal, Spurs and Liverpool will fall short, is Chelsea. They're in that floating area, that 9-2 price. You don't quite know which way they're going to go. Are they rebuilding? Are they redeveloping? Is this a time for them to maybe make a move? You know, they could be 16-1 come Christmas time, or 6-4 down. They're the one team I think there's some doubt and some conjecture about, I think.
A lot harder at the other end of the table, of course. When it comes to the relegation market, you immediately think, well, the teams that came up, they're going to be towards the top of the betting when it comes to being relegated. That's the case once again. So from a bookmaker point of view, you know, you're chalking up Reading fairly short to go back down. Obviously, West Ham are always a slightly different kettle of fish, because there's so many West Ham supporters in the media for one thing, and generally they're priced at a little bit longer odds to go down, simply because people believe they're going to stay in the Premier League. How do you see the relegation?
Well, I see the relegation market has been far more interesting for a start, Dan. I mean, you're talking about the Premier League, you've probably got 3 runners. The relegation market, you've got 9 runners. Let's be very clear about there are 9 solid runners in this market, and that makes it a far more interesting betting market. We've seen good money for 2 teams already here. Good money for Reading at 6-5, and good money that we're not happy about. A team we want to keep on our side in the relegation market are Swansea City, 9-4 into 2-1. Second season syndrome. There's no question in our mind that Brendan Rodgers was key to everything that club did. Michael Laudrup is a dangerous appointment in many ways. That could go wrong. That's a team we're looking to be against, if you like, or with in that market. But there's some shrewd punters who are focused on that. The other team as well, maybe 4-1, West Brom, with Steve Clarke, who's got a lot to prove at this level, running a team. They'd be the 3 teams at the moment who've been most popular. But good points you make there about the likes of West Ham as well.
It's interesting because there are, as you say, 3 winners in closures, really, when it
right.
comes to this. Let's get the latest prices. Chris, how do we make this market?
Well, it's so tight, and for the first time I can ever remember, there's no one odds on here. First time I can ever recall that. Usually it was the case with the 3 newly promoted sides. Just chuck them in at odds on. Just chuck them in at odds on. That's not the case here because, of course, last season none of the 3 newly promoted teams went down, which is the first time it's ever happened. So it's added an extra dimension, an extra spice to the market this year. Reading and Southampton, there we go, joint relegation favourites, if you like, at 11-8. Norwich, a lot of uncertainty about the club at the moment with Paul Lambert leaving, Chris Hughton coming in at 13-8. Then we've got Wigan, perennial survival candidate, 7-4, just stayed up last year, of course. How will they get on this year? Will they start as poorly this year? And then you've got Swansea and West Ham here at the bottom, 9-4. But there's a team on the graphic here I'm getting very, very, very excited about. I tipped them up at 9-2 a couple of weeks ago on the show. Now best price 4-1. Ross has mentioned them 2 minutes ago, and that is West Brom. I think they're serious relegation candidates. They're traditionally a yo-yo club, of course. Roy Hodgson turned them into a sort of mid-table side because he's such a great manager. They've lost him now, and they've got a rookie, really. It's the first time he's ever took a #1 position. That's Steve Clarke. He's got a hell of a lot to prove here. And you're getting a side who are traditionally at the bottom end of the table every year in the Premier League, apart from last season. That's why they're so big. 4-1, for me, is a huge price. I think it should be about 2-1, 9-4. It's 4-1. Get on West Brom to go down. That's the bet for me.
West Brom to go down, and I guess it follows on that when we look at the first managerial casualty, the first manager to leave their post in the Premier League, whether it's resignation, whether it's being sacked, however it happens, if we're talking West Brom, we've got to look at Steve Clarke, I guess, haven't we? I mean, it's always a fascinating market. I think Sam Allardyce is towards the top end of the betting as well, but there are certain managers that are going to be under pressure from the get-go.
I agree with that again, Dan. I mean, just those first 2 markets we mentioned there, though, Premier League and relegation, those are markets that you can have 100 grand on. I mean, they're 6-figure markets. This is a little bit different because obviously rumour, speculation, we don't quite know what's going on as bookmakers. You can't have the same kind of money on these markets, but you have to focus on those teams that are looking weak, maybe a little bit of lack of stability. Certainly West Ham come into that category. That's why Big Sam is at the top of that market and certainly popular. Maybe you look at also the chairman and the way clubs run before they hit the panic button. You'd like to think that the likes of Swansea, for example, would be a well-run club. Potentially West Brom as well may give Steve Clarke a chance, but I certainly think Sam deserves to be at the top of that market given West Ham's history.
It's interesting. It's not necessarily sometimes the manager, it's the people upstairs.
Right.
Let's get the market on this one. Chris, how do we bet?
Yeah, it was Steve Bruce, of course, who went first last year. Who's going to go first this year? Sam Allardyce, like we said, is the favourite here at 7-1. Nigel Adkins, can someone explain this to me, please? Please, Sports Tonight TV, Great Portland Street, London. Try and explain this to me, why he is 8-1 second favourite to first manager to leave his job. He's such a promising young manager. I can see him managing England at some point. That amazes me. That's far too short. One place that's too big, and it's not on this graphic. 18-1, Michael Laudrup at Swansea. It might just, he's not the greatest of managerial careers, but a lot of ups, but a lot of downs as well. And at 18-1, that for me is a huge price. So for me, Adkins far too short, 8-1, by Laudrup at 18-1, far too big.
18-1 Laudrup. Could he struggle at Swansea? It's certainly different to where he's managed before. It'll be intriguing to know exactly how he gets on at the Liberty Stadium in the 12-13 campaign. Everyone will have their own idea about that market. We've got more markets and previews to come. We'll be talking Community Shield shortly. We'll be delving into the Champions League and Europa League as well. Remember, there's qualifiers this week. Plus, there's still tennis and golf to come. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Punter Sports Betting previews and analysis at its very best. I'm pleased to say that Russ Wiseman of Sporting Bet is with me in the studio. Russ, we've been talking Olympics, talking football. We're going to continue on the football theme. We get to the Community Shield because it's this weekend. Been described in the office this week as a competitive friendly. It doesn't really matter, but it does.
It does matter. Absolutely it does. I mean, there's a trophy at stake. People do class it as a trophy. It's the first time these teams can showcase how the pre-season has gone properly to the rest of the country. And I think you do want to make a statement of some kind. And, we've got two top sides, world-class sides, the champions of England, the champions of Europe. It's a game where neither side will want to lose. I think it won't be played at snail's pace. I think it'll be a highly competitive match, Dan.
Is it a good betting heat from a punting point of view? Do people want to get their money down because they've been starved of football since the Euros, although we've had Olympic football as well, but at least club football for a couple of months? Are punters desperate to get involved with two high-profile teams?
I think they are desperate to get involved. I think what you'll find even more so than last season, and we highlighted this on the Punter throughout the 2011 season, is the fact that people are so keen now to form an opinion in play. In-play betting is the way forward. They're not prepared to step in with their monkeys and grands before the game, Dan, but they'll certainly do that after 15 minutes of maybe assessing some of the tactics. Punters far more savvy than they used to be now. They will step in and play, maybe back the under 2.5 goals if they think it's defensive, maybe back Chelsea if they feel as though the structure is right. That's the way punting's going, using their mindset, using a little bit of analysis. I think that's where we'll see this game become very active in the betting markets.
Yeah, speaking of under over 2.5 goals, 6 of the last 8 Community Shields have had over 2.5, so maybe we can expect goals at Villa Park this weekend. Let's get the match prices, though. Chris has got the news for us.
That's a great start, Dan. I got that one as well. You just got there before.
Sorry about that, Chris.
6 out of 8 over 2.5 goals, and that for me is a massive pointer, as Dan says. That really is. Teams tend to play with a bit of abandon in this game, and that would be my bet in this particular match, because the win makes no appeal really. It makes as much appeal as kissing one of the female weightlifters we've been watching in the Olympics the last couple of weeks. About Chelsea 15-8. They brought in all these new players, of course, Marco Marine, Oscar the Grouch, and the two Hazard boys, Eden Hazard and his wee brother as well, just to keep him company. Quite a nice tactic that. They're 15-8. Man City 5-4 favourites, but maybe that's a bit short at this point of the season. So many questions unanswered. No players brought in, of course, into the Emirates Stadium, into Man City at the moment at 5-4. The draw at 9-4. So, yeah, I think the draw is the shout here. I think over 2.5 goals is the shout here. And a game I think we're all looking forward to. Bring back English football. It's back on Sunday. Interesting thing about Manchester City, I always think that Roberto Mancini, he wants to win every single tournament he's in, whether it is the Carling Cup or whatever it's called this year, is it the Capital One Cup, the Community Shield. A little bit like when Jose Mourinho came to Chelsea, he just wanted to win every game. I get the feeling with Chelsea now, with Roberto Di Matteo, he might look at this game slightly different to Roberto Mancini. I know that City lost it last year to Manchester United in what was a fantastic Community Shield, but I just get the feeling that Roberto Mancini feels maybe that his players have to be kept up to their work in horse racing parlance, and he can't let them drop their level a little bit. He doesn't want to get any complacency sneaking into his squad. Yeah, I do agree with that. I think the depth of squad leads to that as well. They can't really afford to take their foot off the gas, and they play their best football and get the best results when they're giving it 100%. But I think the interesting one here is Roberto Di Matteo. I do think with him, I don't think he can afford a slow start to this season, Dan. I think, we looked at that list there. He's 12-1 to be the first manager to go. He's on this one-year deal with the potential additional rolling. Massive pressure. He's under intense pressure. I don't think this guy can afford to start badly. A 3-0 defeat in the Community Shield, and then maybe 1 point from the first 3 games. He could be gone very quickly indeed. And obviously we know he wasn't exactly first choice. It was such a prolonged debate. So I think Chelsea need to start this season well. They'll be up for it as well. That's why I think it'd be a good game. One thing you should point out is it's almost a home fixture for Chelsea, isn't it? Got a great record at Wembley recently. They chinned Spurs 5 in the semi-final, did the business in the finals. Well, they know how to play at this ground. They clearly have got some kind of an affinity with Wembley, and certainly they'll have the bulk of the support just because of the geography of the place. So I think if it was on a neutral ground completely, I think Chelsea would be a bigger price, 15-8. I think it'd probably be 9-4. City more like even money. Just kind of narrows it up ever so slightly. But I think for a tight game, competitive game, and never bet against the draw for me, 9
9 to 4. Always a shout with two good sides. However, I'm not going to get with you boys on these stats. I do not care about these 6 out of 8 being over 2.5 goals. I'm an under man, always will be, and I'll go to my grave being under as well, Dan.
Be interesting one in that game. It's at Villa Park, incidentally, this weekend. The last time the Community Shield was held at Villa Park, or Charity Shield it was then called, the winners?
Oh dear.
Manchester City.
Oh dear.
Back
Okay.
in 1972. It'd be an interesting game, as you say. You do feel that Chelsea want to put a marker down. I've got to take that on board, I must admit. Speaking of Chelsea, we've got to talk Champions League next. Obviously, we've had the qualifiers over the course of the last few weeks, and the third round qualifiers we've had Celtic action. It's not going to make too much of an impact when it comes to the outright market, though, is it?
No, not at all, really. And you know, you look at this. It's such a mature market again, Dan. We talk about global financial markets. This is one of those again. You've got the cream of the crop at the top there, as you'd expect. Although City now trading around about a 6-1 chance. Plenty of people will be interested in that. But it's the two Spanish teams who dominate that market. Always will do. I know we had a real result as a bookmaker last year, but you can go right down that list. There's probably 12 good, solid contenders. It's about putting something together, though. When you look at the defending champions of 14-1, it gives you an idea of how hard that tournament is to win.
Let's get the prices. It will be the two La Liga sides that dominate the market, I'm sure. Chris, how do you see it?
Absolutely, all about Barcelona and Real Madrid here. It only feels like yesterday since Chelsea won on Saturday night against Bayern Munich, doesn't it? But we've got a brand new season coming up here. And like we said, the Spanish side's dominating. But a big question mark over Barcelona here. New coach, Tito Villanova, how will he get on here? They're 72 favourites with Real at 4-1. Man City, such a dreadful season last year in the Champions League, knocked out in the group stages, of course. That was pretty humiliating for the Manchester club. How will they cope this year? As champions of England, of course, they're 7-1. Manchester United, too big for me, 14-1, for reasons I've just mentioned in the previous part. But for me, the bet here is Bayern Munich at 14-1. So close to winning it last year, of course. And they've beefed up their squad, unlike a lot of the English sides. They brought in Mario Mandzukic, who, of course, wowed us at Euro 2012 from Wolfsburg. And Xherdan Shaqiri as well from Bâle, a very, very talented Swiss player. They've beefed up the squad. So for me, it's Bayern here at 14-1.
How on earth can PSG be the price that they currently are? If PSG played in the Premier League and they'd spent the money that they have spent over the last 18 months or so, surely they're a bit shorter than 18s, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, they were 33-1 into 18 and 16, so they have shortened up. They've been a big mover, but I still think punters are so savvy and worldly wise when it comes to a tournament of this calibre. I mean, it's the elite tournament, isn't it, Dan? I mean, you can have any amount of players signed and it's difficult to put together. They're in a very similar situation, actually, to Manchester City last year, and of course they failed at the very first hurdle, didn't they, as well? So it's difficult competition to make some advances in. However, if this spending continues, that price will only contract. And I mean, you've got legitimately world-class players just flooding into that club.
It's only spending really that's going to make the prices change at the moment. And even when we get the groups drawn, and I know City were in a very tough group last year because of their lowly coefficient. That's unlikely to happen again, but there's not going to be too many price changes here, maybe through until, I don't know, October, November. I mean, league form's not going to make any difference at all. If Barcelona somehow lost their first 2 group games of the Champions League, maybe it'd change then, but you'd still probably back them to get through. It's difficult to know when the market movements are going to come here, certainly not in the first few months of the season.
Dan, it's a really good point you make. I mean, it's literally like trading Microsoft shares in this kind of market. It's so mature, so much information available. It's going to take something massive. It's actually happened with PSG. Obviously, 33-1 into 18 is a big move, but that's because we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds being spent on players. Like you said there, dramatic set of results may tweak the prices. It won't be dramatic, though, in this case. It'll be a long time before they see that market move.
Plenty of information when it comes to the Champions League. We're lacking information when it comes to the Europa League. Not our fault, nothing to do with us. It's the fact that we don't know who's actually going to be in it post-Christmas because of the drop down from the Champions League to the Europa League. It does make it a nightmare for the bookmakers to point up to price up in one perspective, but for the punters it's even worse, isn't it? I mean, how do you have a bet in this? Is there any value? Is the fact that it's 14's the field factored in that we're going to get Champions League teams dropping in? How on earth do you do it?
Well, I mean, again, the points you make are very good, Dan. I mean, you mentioned a great point off air. You've got 14-1 there about Inter Milan. You know, would they be a shorter price in the Champions League? It's highly likely they could well be. So you kind of have to build these factors in. But you've got the very realistic possibility as a punter of backing what you perceived to be the very best side in the tournament now, they would be the 5th best team in the tournament by the time the Champions League have passed down the kind of rejects from that tournament. It's a very difficult tournament to bet in. We see very limited anti-post action here. You may find a gem, 1 or 2 of the Portuguese sides occasionally that you can back and maybe take a little bit of value about a Benfica or Porto. It's that kind of team when they come into it. But you're really taking a big chance at this stage to get involved. I think it's one you have to give a wide berth to until you know what you're playing with.
Chris, can you make any sense of it for us at all?
No. We're lacking information, lacking interest in the Europa League as well. It's a byword for dull. But anyway, let's be positive. It's starting a new season. Europa League. Here we go. The co-favourites are 3. Atletico Madrid, of course, 2010, 2012 winners, defending champions. Inter Milan, great historical European club at 14-1. And Spurs, of course, who didn't care about the competition the last 2 times they've been in it. 14-1 co-favourites. Liverpool as well. Brendan Rodgers says, count us out. But you can still back them at 16-1 if you're a bit mad. And the new Russian billionaires, Anze, 20-1. Alongside a team that wowed us last season, Athletic Bilbao, Eker Munayin and Fernando Llorente. How will they get on this season? If I'm having a punt on this at the moment, it's a tough one, but I like Napoli at 25-1 outside the graphic. Consistently a top 6 side now in Serie A, Napoli. Almost got through to the semi-finals of the Champions League last season. Chelsea just sacked AVB just at the right time, so that's why they got knocked out the competition, Napoli. So for me, Napoli 25-1. As long as they keep Cavani, they've got a shout at 25s.
Yeah, Edison Cavani, fantastic player. Of course, we saw him in the Olympics. We didn't see too much of Uruguay, unfortunately, for backers there. But certainly Napoli have got every chance, should they get through the group stages and maybe avoid some of the bigger teams that drop down for the Champions League. And you never know, Andre Villas-Boas has had success, of course, with Porto in that particular competition. He might take it certainly more seriously than maybe other English sides have done in the past. That's the Europa League and Champions League, and indeed the Community Shield done for now. Much more to come on the Punter, though. We're going to turn our attentions to tennis and golf. We've got the US Open when it comes to tennis, and the final major of the season, the USPGA Championship at Kiawah Island, to preview. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Punters. We endeavour to keep you across all the best betting action across the sporting calendar. In our final part, we'll be delving into golf, but first, tennis. Russ Wiseman of Sporting Bet with me in the studio. Russ, we're talking tennis, US Open, a little bit ahead of the action. Why? Well, because Andy Murray has just won the Olympics, and of course, not necessarily from a punting point of view, but from a British sporting angle, we want Andy Murray to drop his maiden tag when it comes to those Grand Slam events. Generally on Murray, over the last couple of majors, have you been with him? As a bookmaker, do you think he's always going to be a bit of a bottler and a choker? What are your thoughts? Well,
I think he's not a bottler and choker, Dan. It's a generally accepted view, isn't it? This is the golden age of tennis, probably never to be seen again. Players who have hit legendary status, 3 of the greatest players ever to play the game, all in the mix. And Andy Murray is part of that argument now, isn't he, after winning the Olympic gold medal? So you have to give him a major chance of winning this tournament. So it is a tournament, though, the US Open, that does kind of have a wear and tear element to it. You have seen players fade away through injury, very hard courts. Nadal traditionally has struggled in this tournament with knee trouble. At the moment, there has to be a major doubt about him. Djokovic isn't really in his prime form that he has been maybe 6 months ago. Federer was pretty tame in that final just yesterday. Murray goes into this with a very realistic chance, but don't forget there's some real lively contenders in this who, on the day, on these courts at Flushing Meadow, can really deliver.
We've been here before with Murray, though, because it wasn't so long ago that I think you guys priced him up as favourite for the Australian Open, maybe a couple of seasons ago, because of his form towards the back end of one season. I think the point you make about where the US Open comes in the calendar is a real valid one, because we know Nadal's needs have gone, and when it comes to that stage of the season, he's not interested. And speaking about players not being interested, was Roger Federer really interested yesterday? Are we bigging Andy Murray up too much here? He's won Masters events against Federer and Djokovic. Was it really a top draw win, do you think?
I think we've got to give him that, haven't we? We've got to give him that benefit of the doubt. Me personally, I thought Federer was half a yard off the pace as well, but he did have a brutally difficult semi-final that took a lot out of him against Del Potro. Maybe he didn't have enough left in the tank, and maybe this kind of attritional wear and tear tournament, as we mentioned there before, 5 sets a game in really brutal conditions, you've got to be in peak form. One thing we can't take away from Andy Murray, he's always in wonderful physical condition. That's what you need in this tournament. If you want to win the US Open, Dan, you've got to be there at the end, running hard. And you know, he does his miles, Andy Murray. You've got to give him that. Djokovic still the man to beat, but a couple of chinks in his armour now. He definitely goes into this major with as good a chance as he's ever had, I think, of lifting a title of this kind.
Is that reflected in the odds? Chris, what does the market tell us?
It tells us that Novak Djokovic is a very weak favourite at the moment. Andy Murray, who was clear fourth favourite in these odds a couple of weeks ago, now 72 second favourite with Sporting Bet, which is absolutely amazing. Novak Djokovic 15-8, real question mark over his form at the moment. That's no doubt about that. Lost the French Open final, lost comprehensively against Federer in the Wimbledon semi-finals, and then could only finish fourth in the Olympics, losing to Del Potro in the bronze medal match yesterday as well. So real concerns over Djokovic. Andy Murray, wasn't it wonderful seeing him doing Britain so proud yesterday in the Wimbledon final? 72 second favourite there. Roger Federer 4-1. He's not won this competition for 4 years. And Nadal, well, surely serious question marks over Rafael Nadal at the moment, injury concerns and that. I certainly could not be backing him at 5-1, not on your Nelly. Del Potro, the big varied player with the bookmaker. Some as short as 8-1, some as big as 18. Sporting Bet, kind of in the middle there at 10-1. Not for me though. I think, boys, and I agree with Ross, this is Murray's best ever chance to win a Grand Slam. Come on, Andy.
Andy Murray, 7-2 shot. I must admit, I just can't see it. The stats suggest his win-lose percentage at the US Open is not as good as Wimbledon, not as good as Australia as well, believe it or not. And we've always thought that Murray's best chance, is what we're told, is always going to be in the US Open. I can see him falling short. We talked about the big four, but there's one or two interesting double-figure odds runners, Ross.
Well, definitely, Dan. I mean, and Chris mentioned there, Juan Martín Del Potro, a former recent winner of this tournament, and he is starting to come back from some brutal injury trouble, and now is starting to look like a guy back to his best form. Made Federer dig in all the way, as we previously mentioned there in the semi-finals at the Olympics. This is a guy with a track record of this event. This is a tournament where you need to be aggressive. And the big problem with Andy Murray, he's a very defensive player still. One of the big criticisms of him is he doesn't really go for the kill. You can't level that at Del Potro. Goes for every single shot. If there's a guy who maybe can find a way into that front four, it's him. I think he deserves to be a 10-1 chance. When you see the likes of Tsonga, who's really a foremost who doesn't get the business done at the serious end, he's the guy who could conceivably shake this market up. 10-1, I still think it's a fair price. You can get the 18 that Chris mentioned there. It won't get any bigger than that. It's
amazing that we don't talk about Federer as we once did. We weren't even talking about him before Wimbledon, were we really? We always imagine now that Nadal took his crown and then it was passed to Djokovic, but Federer proved, certainly in that Wimbledon final, that he's no back number. Could he win it again, mate?
Oh, definitely. And again, you look at him yesterday, Dan, I think you and I are probably in the minority, but I did think he probably was a half yard off the pace, didn't really want to give it everything. Universally beloved by everybody as well. I mean, you look at the guy afterwards, he got as many cheers as Andy Murray did winning the gold. So he goes back to Flushing Meadow. He has done tremendously well there. As Chris mentioned, 4 years since he lifted the crown. He's in great form. He, again, is probably a better bet at this point than someone like Novak Djokovic, who is showing signs of wear and tear.
Big four in the tennis certainly have dominated when it comes to those Grand Slam events over the last few years, with the odd ep section. When it comes to the golf, Chris, it's a little bit different, isn't it? Because we've had so many different winners, and we're going to move on to the USPGA Championship. I mean, you can make a case for many, can't you? How are you seeing this last major of the campaign?
Well, it really is the way to the poorhouse, getting involved with the majors. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I think we've had so many shock winners. Happened again at the Open. If you did watch the Punter the Monday before the Open, you'll have heard Trevor Harris backing up Ernie Els at 40-1, so well done to Trevor Harris for that. But yeah, all but Woods here again, and his prices drifted after an uninspiring week in the Bridgestone Invitational. 8-1 best price this time last week, now as big as 10-1. There we go, 10-1 Tiger Woods there. Luke Donald, 21-1, not for me, a player who always kind of gets involved at the end after his chance is gone, like, you know. Has he ever really put someone into major contention for me? Luke Donald, no. I would be swerving him. Rory McIlroy, likewise, far too obsessed with Caroline Wozniacki to win another major for the
moment. Who can blame him?
You've got to dump her, man. Dump Wozniacki to get back into your game. She's not that good looking. Well, she is, but winning majors is more important. Not for me, 22-1. Certainly not Lee Westwood at 26-1. my personal view is, and it saddens me to say it, is he'll never win a major. So not for me at 26 to 1. Dustin Johnson at 33. Keegan Bradley, of course, won the Bridgestone last night. He won this last year. So he's a man definitely in form. Another man I have to offer you on a plate to now is Jason Duffner, a man in tremendous form at the moment. He's gone top 10 in 5 of his last 6 US Tour events, tied 4th in the US Open. He won the Crown Plaza earlier in the season. He finished level with Keegan Bradley in this competition last year, losing in a playoff. He's the man in form, and you get him around the 40 to 1 mark. Jason Duffner is my tip for the USPGA.
Bookmakers looking to take on Tiger Woods again in this one? Yeah,
definitely, Dan. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't get the business done when it matters, and that's a fact now. I mean, we've got evidence to back that up now over the last few years. His putter just simply doesn't work when it needs to. 9, 10 to 1. We'll see money for him again. I fully expect him to be there near the end, and I fully expect him to fail again. He just doesn't seem to have that killer instinct. He's not the player he was. It's as simple as that now. And like I said, we've got plenty of evidence. Interesting one about this track here. You being a golf expert, Dan, I hope I don't kind of steal in your thunder here, because you'll put me right. I know Kiwa Island, obviously a proper links course. A lot of wind here.
Huge winds.
Real serious windy problems. Rory McIlroy with his high ball flight could struggle here. But there are many times on this course where you can hit driver 3-iron on certain holes. The next day it could be driver pitching wedge. So let's get that in perspective. It's going to be a wind-affected course. You need people who can play great links golf. For me, I know you're going to pick out some big prize people out of this list, I'm sure. I'll look at Jim Furyk at the moment. I know he blew it last night and didn't really finish in style, but great links background around about 50 to 1. And David Toms hasn't really been playing a lot lately, but 4th and 8th in recent events. Again, a class act. 125 to 1. I'm looking down the list at people to come in the top 6 that may be in a 100, 150 to 1 mark. I'm sure they're out there.
Is the USPGA Championship as popular as the other majors? I mean, from a purist point of view, people say this is the best field. It always has the top 100 in the world, and the Masters usually doesn't, and the Open with its qualifying, likewise the US Open, certainly there are vagaries of the field with those 2 events. But as far as the punters are concerned, it's not got the glory of, say, as the green jacket or indeed a claret jug. It's
definitely the 4th one in terms of interest and in terms of turnover, no question. However, I did have a look at kind of historical betting, Sporting Bet and other firms I've worked at over the last 10 years regarding this tournament. You get a lot more professional money in the PGA. You tend to get players who, again, coming to the end of a hard season, may not be quite on their game. The course conditions can really affect it. You get some wonderful, wonderful 10 to 11 match bets in this. I know you could probably pick out 1 or 2 for me right now, Dan. You'll find that kind of market is available to here, and good money can be made on that. Whether you like it or not, though, it's still a golf major. Come Sunday night, if it's tight and active, millions of pounds will be struck. Everybody likes to play then in the in-running market. So that'll be the way I
was going to say about the in-running, because it's huge these days, isn't it, on the golf? And Sunday on the golf, it doesn't come up to football levels, but it's usually sort of horse racing, football, golf. And, you know, the rest of the sport is a very distant 4th. I mean, golf is massive on a Sunday, especially when it comes to the majors. How difficult is it for your odds compilers to keep in touch with them?
Well, you're doing golf as a disservice there, Dan. It does measure up to the football sometimes. It's absolutely huge. And, I mean, even these US Tour events now and some of the European events are still big betting events. However, these majors are massive. We tend to have 2 or 3 traders actually actively watching what happens. Obviously, timings can be an issue. There are times where people can maybe just nick one over on with an eagle earlier on in the day or a couple of minutes earlier that isn't reported. You have to be on your toes. But I do think that course conditions and a knowledge of the certain courses that you're looking at can really help this. But, you know, last 9 holes of any major, if you've got 3 or 4 guys up there, you'll see whopping 4-figure bets aplenty. Everybody wants to play. It's not easy, is it? And as we saw with Adam Scott, no one's ever passed the post at this level.
Yeah, Adam Scott with that bogey finish. Let's get it right. 4 bogeys on the spin. How on earth he lost that? I've got no idea. He certainly cost me some money. Yeah, Kiwa Island, as you mentioned, is a fantastic course. We've got not any course form at all, really, when it comes to it. You've got to go back to the 2003 World Cup won by Rory Sabatini and Trevor Immelman for South Africa. I'm sure we'll delve into it more in the next few days. Russ Wiseman of Sporting Bet, many thanks for joining me on today's Punter. Many thanks to Chris Graham as well. Hopefully, we've pointed you in the right direction to 1 or 2 decent bets over the next few days. But this week, there is plenty more to come. There'll be more athletics, more football, more golf, more tennis, everything from a sports betting angle. From all of us on the show, it's goodbye, and we'll see you next time.